This is a photograph I shot for spec campaign for Patagonia. I documented the whole process, and in this video I'm taking you with me from start to finish, beginning with the approach, concept, preparations, and moving on to the shoots, techniques, and post-production. If that sounds interesting, come along. Let's begin. In case you don't know, a spec campaign or spec work is work a photographer does without actually being hired by the brand to do so. Many photographers, and generally creatives, do this to practice and build up their portfolio, because generally speaking, you'll be hired for what you already do. So if you have a portfolio with, for example, lots of photography of outdoor brands, there is a higher probability of being booked for that kind of work, not weddings or something else that is rather unrelated. So to make this perfectly clear, Patagonia didn't hire me to do this. I'm doing this as a spec work to practice my photography and also show you the process and share any lessons I learned along the way. The final goal of this project in this video is to put together a PDF file of the campaign that I could, for example, put up on my portfolio or even send to Patagonia to introduce myself. So let's begin with the pre-production. When it comes to photo projects, I think pre-production is one of the key factors that can lead to success. However, it is also one of the commonly forgotten factors. We photographers enjoy just going out and shooting, which is fun and it's great to do this, but for a proper project, I highly recommend to invest time and energy into the pre-production. So what exactly does that look like? In my experience, pre-production involves coming up with an idea and a concept, planning the shoot and the ideal outcome, so what you want to achieve in your shoot, and also planning as much of the logistics of the shoot beforehand is recommended. The more planning you do ahead, the less problems you're going to have to solve on the spot, and the less problems you have to solve on the spot, the more of your energy can be directed towards the photography, which will lead to a better outcome. So once I had decided that I want to shoot a product for Patagonia, the next step was to narrow the idea down to one product and then come up with an idea around that. The product I chose was this cute sweater. Let me give you a little demonstration. This is the fleece. I really like it. So I like the colours, and I also just really like the detailed design with all sorts of fish and trees and other things on it. This was actually an easy choice to make because I was thinking of shooting a jumper anyway, and when I stumbled upon this one with the cute fish design, the decision was not a hard one to make. The next step is to come up with a concept. I prefer to shoot around a concept instead of just randomly taking photos of the jumper. I like a story that guides the shoot. I took my time to think and came up with the following idea. One of Patagonia's core values is sustainability, and one of the ways this manifests in the business is the fact that if I buy a product and after some years it has some sort of damage, I can bring it to the Patagonia store and get it fixed and consequently keep it for longer. I combined this thought with another one. I think that a fleece sweater is the kind of thing that a dad would hand down to his child, and I like the thought of a dad who's worn a fleece pullover for many years handing the sweater down to his child so that the child can continue using the jacket to stay warm on the frosty autumn days in the outdoors. And so I came up with two slogans that summarise the idea of this project. Dad's sweater. This one is quite direct and maybe a little boring, I suppose. Too literal. Same sweater, new stories. This one's more typical of an advertising campaign. The photographic idea for this project is to shoot a bunch of photographs that show the sweater in action, plus shoot a few photos that show a figure representing the dad of the main subject wearing the sweater and then handing it down. I think it's easier to explain the idea if I show you some visuals, so let's do that. It was time to visualize the ideas and come up with a visual language. This is important in my opinion because I think it acts a bit like a guide for later on the shoot, because you don't want to be standing on location unsure about what you're looking for. I find it very helpful to think through everything beforehand and basically do most of the headwork in preparation so that the shoot is merely the execution of the ideas. However, shoots rarely go as planned, as you will see in this video, so it's important to stay adaptive, and to be adaptive, I personally have found that some conceptual guidance that I made in preparation is a good prerequisite. One pretty common way to do this is mood boards. A mood board is simply a collection of references. So usually it's a collage of images that visualizes the desired look of the shoot. So I like to collect a bunch of images that have anything that I'd like to take note of. This can be quite simply the mood, but also more detailed things such as the color palette, angle, composition, lighting, texture, or posing of the model. I personally like to then separate my board into a couple groups, which I each referenced for different reasons. I'd also recommend adding notes so that your future self can read why you added a certain image. To find images, you can literally look everywhere and anywhere, but my go-to starting point is Pinterest. But I also have a saved folder on Instagram, and sometimes I randomly stumble upon some great photography in an online magazine or other sources of that sort. To actually create the mood board, I like to use Millernote, which is a free online tool. It's kind of like a digital notebook or a board where you can dump ideas, visualize concepts and plan shoots, and make mood boards. This is my go-to tool for planning projects, and Millernote has been a partner of the channel. They've partnered with me in the past, and today they are back as the sponsor of this video, so shout out to them. Let me show you the Millernote board that I made for this project. So this is just an overview with my list of ideas, concepts, some reference photos, and the product, the model, and some details for the shoot itself. The mood board is here. This is a board within this board. So I can go in this board, and here you can see my mood board for the shoot with 4 groups. A bunch of reference photographs, some written notes, and visual notes such as colors that I want to take note of, which can easily be done with the color swatch tool. By the way, something I love about Millernote is how easy it is. You can literally just copy and paste an image you like from Pinterest to Millernote, or you can use their web clipper tool to directly add images to your board. If you need a kickstart for the design or arrangement, Millernote has templates, and in case it's a collaborative project with another photographer, I can simply send them a link to the board and we can work on this board together. And if I need to check my references during the shoot, I can do so in their app, which is synced to my account. And as said, this tool is free. There is a paid version, but you can already do a lot with the free version too, and there's no time limit. So if you're working on a project, I'd highly recommend that you try out Millernote for yourself. You can sign up for a free account using the link in the description. Thank you so much to Millernote for working with me again. So with the conceptual preparations done, there were 3 more to-dos before the shoot. Firstly, I need a location. As usual, for location scouting, I've been hanging out on Google Maps a lot, and I think I found the perfect place for this shoot. Check this out. So here in the middle of the mountains, I've already marked these 3 little things here. There seems to be a sort of meadow. Let me just turn on the Google Street View thing. And so let's just check this out, for example. I mean, this looks gorgeous. Look at that. I don't know if we're going to have that much snow. I don't think we're that lucky, but maybe we'll have more leaves. So this apparently was in September 2016. This seems to be a constant theme for me, but I'm just so happy to have Google Maps and I can do these location scoutings. And thank you to whoever puts up these 360-degree photos. I really need to learn how to do that myself so that I can contribute as well. Secondly, I'm going to need a model, and thirdly, I need to decide what gear I'm going to need for the shoot. For this project, I decided to ask my friend Fabian whether he'd like to model. He's actually a photographer, in fact a really good one, who does exactly this kind of outdoor work. However, I thought he'd suit this project really well as a model for a change, and if I have the chance to shoot a project like this with a friend, I'm not going to let that pass. To my delight, he agreed, and we found a day that aligns our schedules. So finally, let's check out the gear list before we head out to shoot. For this project, I chose my trusty Sony a7 III again. 2 key factors that I like about this camera for projects of this kind are the incredible autofocus and the camera's high-speed shooting capabilities. It's not on the level of a proper sports camera or anything, but perfectly fast enough for what I need. The lens is just going to be my standard Tamron 28-75mm lens with a Moment V&D plus CineBloom 10% filter. Additionally, I packed my Sony 14mm f1.8 in case I need some super wide-angle shots. Lastly, I asked Fabian if he could bring his flash, the one I used for the North Face photos that I really enjoyed shooting with. Unfortunately, I asked him way too late and he wasn't able to bring that one, but he said he'd bring a smaller one. I think it's about time that I get my own flash. Alright, it's the final evening before the shoot right now, and I think I'm pretty much prepared. I'm still trying to mentally prepare myself a little more. I'm having another look at my mood board, and I might just add a couple more photos because there are some rather specific things that I want to do, and I must not forget to shoot those as well, because this is not just me trying to shoot the product, but there's just a bit more conceptual stuff that I would like to add because I think it's cool, and I really need to put myself mentally in there. And also something I struggle with is, seeing as Fabian is a friend, we're obviously going to be chatting a lot, and I mustn't be too distracted from the actual mission here, so that's going to be a little bit of a challenge tomorrow, but we will make it work, and I really look forward to the shoot. The weather is looking a little challenging, by the way. The sun is supposed to come out, which was not my original plan, though I do not think it should be a problem. Also, I really need to pack some warm clothes because it's going to be so cold tomorrow, according to the weather forecast. We'll see. And so I finished up my preparations, and early next morning, it was time to head out into the mountains. So lucky me, I have the expert with me. Fabian has been here before, and he knew that before we actually get to our spot, there is a spot before the spot. So that's where we're going right now, and we have some lovely fog. It turns out Fabian had been at this location before, so he had some insider knowledge, if you will, and showed me this pretty lake on the way. The mood was incredible, with the morning mist adding a lot of atmosphere to the scenery. I wanted to get some shots that captured the cold autumn mood of being out and about with a friend, so this was a great place to start. Was ich ganz gern mache, ist, du kannst dich kurz umdrehen, als würdest du zum See schauen. Ich rufe dir dann zu, so, hey Fabi, schau mal her, ich will ein Bild machen. Und dann kannst du dich charakterlich einfach in diesen Moment reinversetzen. So, ja, was, ich mache ein Bild, genau. As usual, I felt like I needed some time to warm up, and so we started off with some simple shots that could be useful for the final product later, but as standalone photos, they don't really blow you off your socks, I suppose. Ja, bleiben wir da, das ist ganz gut. Sehr schön. Passt? Ja, genau, mit dem Framing ist gleich ein bisschen besser. Passt. Genau, speichert. Hast du einen guten Oh, schön. Ja, komm, dann nehmen wir den mit. Ich hab's jetzt nicht gesehen, was gut? Oh, schaut gut aus. Fein. I like how this one turned out, but at the same time I was not sure yet whether this will actually be useful for the final product. For a project of this sort, however, I personally like a quantitative approach in which I just stay safe and shoot more rather than less. A little later, I spotted some people, fishermen presumably, on a boat which in the misty landscape looked pretty epic, so I shot some photos of them too. Anyway, that was our first stop, just a quick one, before we continued our drive to the actual location that I had planned to shoot at. Summer is ended, the leaves are turning brown. Oh, danke. Ciao, ciao. Okay, we've made it pretty much to the location, not quite yet, but the trees are currently opening up right in front of us. We've got some massive rocks with a little bit of the first autumn snow on top in front of us. Oh, look at that, that's what we're looking for, that's what we're here for. Right, first spot, let's try to get these trees here with Fabian in front. We came across a frosty field that was still in the shade, where I thought I could probably shoot some of the ideas I had in mind. Bist bereit? Von mir kann's losgehen. At first I shot some photos that I like to call obligatory shots. They are somewhat boring basic shots that simply show the product in not a particularly creative manner. I tried to do this early on to not forget it later, because it's always good to get some simple product shots. Du wirst eine Afterkamera verwenden, oder? Then I wanted to try some flash photography, and luckily Fabian had a little flash with him that I could use. Leidet mir da einfach. Genau, ich glaube, bleibe mal da. Ich muss ein bisschen schauen. Ich muss ein bisschen... Oops. This is a photo I totally shot by mistake, however I kind of like it. I was intending to shoot some more abstract photos later anyway, and this one unintentionally kicks that off, I suppose. To start off with the flash, I wanted to shoot some simple full-body photos. These also kind of fit in that obligatory shot category, though I must say that the flash gives it a way more interesting look than what I usually consider to be an obligatory shot. This one, for example, I like a lot. The flash highlights Fabian in the foreground while the surroundings still convey that frosty autumn morning vibe. Later, in post, I edited the photo with this look that is reminiscent of film photos, almost as if this was simply shot with a point-and-shoot camera. By the way, in case you like this photo editing style, I just want to remind you that my Patreon exists, where you can find Lightroom presets, color grading tutorials, Lightroom editing tutorials and such. You can check it out via the link in the description.
Oh, that's pretty nice, alright.
By the way, the reason for which I don't actually just use a point-and-shoot camera for a shot like this one is that I want to maximize flexibility when shooting a project like this one. Film is flexible to an extent, but shooting with the Sony lets me stylize the shot in all sorts of different ways, which is a flexibility that makes me feel a sense of security in case I decide to go in a completely different direction during the post-production process.
Danke. Hallo Sonne. Geht. Passt. Danke. Die wird genau mal so weitermachen, das ist super.
At this point, the sun was coming out, and I shot a couple photos of Fabian with the flash, with the sun just peeking into frame in the background, which created a pretty cool look in my opinion.
Boah, ja, das hat Stimmung hier mit Sonne von hinten, aber Blitz von vorn. Taugt mal.
I really like how these turned out. This particular one has even some motion blur, which I quite like. To me, this feels like a good balance between the obligatory shot that somewhat clearly pictures the product, while keeping it strongly stylized. After that, I just shot a couple details of the ground and the frost, which I wanted to shoot just in case I need these later as additional images for the final product.
Closer. Weil wenn du die leicht darüber drehst, dass die Sonne ein bisschen mehr... Oh, ja.
At this point, the sun had risen above the mountain and was lighting up the scenery in a totally different mood. Here are two shots I got, which aren't really special or anything, but you never know, maybe they'll be useful later.
Genau, bleib mal kurz da stehen, ich muss nur kurz überlegen vom Framing her, was ich so machen will. Wollen wir in die andere Richtung drehen, genau? Ja, genau.
Then I shot a few more simple photos of Fabian wearing the sweater. I really like how the sun shines into the photo from the side here, and the pretty backlight hitting the left side of Fabian. Also, I went for a bit of an odd angle here, but I actually like it a lot. It's slightly low and tilted, a bit of a Dutch angle going on here, which makes the photo feel dynamic and not too still. Then I had enough of this location and wanted to move on in the hopes of finding something else interesting deeper in the valley. As we continued to walk down the road, we came to a spot that was still in the shade, which was great because there were actually still a couple shots I wanted to get in this cold, shady look. One of the shots I wanted to get was a photo that looks nostalgic, one that looks like I just casually shot a photo of Fabian on a trip on a cold autumn morning. I think these turned out pretty nice. I went for a dark, warm look in the editing to get that filmic nostalgic look, which I think worked out alright.
Bleibe mal genau so. Das sieht fantastisch aus.
At this point, there was no escaping from the sun, and so I just had to be adaptive and flexible.
Danke.
These two shots of Fabian in the sun turned out pretty epic looking in my opinion. I like these a lot.
Das Licht gerade ist wirklich der Wahnsinn.
So originally, I was actually planning to shoot on a wet, moody autumn day. However, the day we scheduled for the shoot turned out to be quite the opposite. Sometimes, as a photographer, it is then important to be flexible and adapt to the new situation. This is something I've actually always struggled with. When I have an idea in mind that is weather dependent, my mind sort of fixates on that, and I find it quite hard to shoot in the new environment. On this day, however, I had one major advantage that made things a little easier. The location was gorgeous. So despite the drastic change in light, it was not hard to find a different kind of beauty than what I had set out to find, because how could you not find some beautiful frames in this landscape here? After shooting some simple detail shots of the design in the sun, I wanted to shoot a pretty particular composition. I had Fabian lie on the ground and brought the camera down to the same height to frame the big mountain at the back in the background. This was tricky, at least for me, because of the specific angle that I needed and the camera settings. I set my lens to 50mm in order to get some compression so that the mountain appears rather large in frame. The challenge was to find the right angle that is optimal for both the mountain and Fabian at the same time. Additionally, I had to use slightly unusual camera settings because at this focal length with the small distance to Fabian, the background was completely blurry at f2.8 and there was barely any mountain to be seen.
Aber ich glaube, irgendwie es war voll tricky, aber ich glaube, ich habe es jetzt gefunden.
Here's the result. I ended up going with f11, a shutter speed of 1/80th and an ISO of 320. I'm quite happy with the level of blur now. It's blurry, but not so much that you can barely recognize the mountain. I suppose I could have tried this at f16 or even f22. The ISO at 320 is still pretty low, but this is fine.
Opening, closing, all in one day. Blue sky, then violent rain.
Then, before moving on, I just shot a couple more detail photos of the landscape, again for later. These photos are not intended to be standalone photos, you'll see later what I used them for.
Rechts aufgewiesen, was gemacht, gell? Yeah.
Next, I wanted to walk to the other side, where I thought there might be a river, which is a subject I wanted to shoot because I thought that suits the fish theme on the sweater's design. Unfortunately, we didn't find a river, just a riverbed, but that's no problem. We decided to just stop at the river that we had passed on the way here. However, this spot was quite interesting nevertheless, and we experimented a little. I found a cool angle to shoot and the lighting was really interesting, so I shot a couple photos of Fabian here.
Und mit dem Blick so rauf zu den Berg da oben. Ich schau mal kurz. So, von da so. Ja, genau. Und passt schon. Und jetzt wieder anziehen.
This is what I got, and I think you know what I mean by interesting lighting, right? The sunlight was so harsh and bright, however the angle was actually quite pleasant. And later in the editing I realized that by strongly pulling down the exposure and going with a darker look, these photos turn out quite interesting, at least to me. The sunlight looks more like a spotlight of sorts while the landscape is darkened, which makes the lighting kind of look theatrical when edited in this manner. Here are two photos I edited in a more normal high dynamic range style, and this is my alternative dark edit, which I think looks so interesting, captivating in a way.
Passt, alles gut. Ich glaube, ich würde hier so runtergehen. Oh ja, warte, dann nehmen wir dich am besten mit, den Berg im Hintergrund jetzt so mit.
We shot a couple more in a similar style. I just let Fabian play around with the sweater, put it on and so forth. By the way, at this point I had advanced my camera settings to the tiniest aperture. I was shooting at f22 with a shutter speed of around 125, and to get enough light I had my ISO up at 2000.
Passt! Boah, das waren jetzt viele Bilder.
Here are the results, and I'm so fond of this dark look. This is exactly what I consider to be the best case when I need to be adaptive and flexible and change up the style due to the lighting. I'm really happy with these.
Wenn du ein Product-Only-Foto willst, können wir da das ein paar Mal so schmeißen und es ist nur das Produkt, wie es in der Luft ist.
Oh ja, das ist eine gute Idee. Ja, machen wir das. Das klingt lustig. Ja. Probieren nochmal, ja.
So Fabian had this great idea to throw the sweater up into the air and capture it flying. It sounded like a fun idea, so we gave it a try. To freeze the moment, I had to increase my shutter speed. I ended up going with 1/400th of a second, with the aperture still pretty closed at f14 to really get everything in focus, and the ISO at 2000. After a couple attempts, I swapped lenses with the video camera to try this with the 14mm lens.
Ja. 3, 2, 1. Okay, von mir aus geht's.
Honey, I am so sorry. Didn't mean to make you cry.
These turned out pretty cool in my opinion. I love how the harsh sunlight adds some flares to the frame and a glowing rim light to the sweater. As you can see, I mostly went with the dark editing style again. This is a coincidental shot that I think actually turned out quite intriguing with Fabian's hand coming into frame. And these are the 14mm shots. This one turned out really cool, I find. I love the flare from the sun and how the sleeve comes close to the lens so that it looks like it's reaching for the viewer. This one turned out quite clean looking, and here I decided to apply a bright edit to make it more viable as a classic product shot.
Passt. Das haben wir.
Next, we spent a little more time on the pebbles of the river here. I shot a few product details and then I wanted to try to get some low angle photos of Fabian. And by low angle, I mean proper low angle.
Magst du circa da stehen? Ich werde... Ja, das kommt eigentlich sehr cool. Magst doch mit dem Fuß hierher kommen, dass du wirklich so senkrecht über mir bist. Das taugt mir.
I think these turned out pretty cool. I like the angle and how the light hits Fabian from the front. Finally, I shot a few more photos of Fabian in the bush here and some environmental details that could be useful for later. Then it was time to move on to the final spot. On our way back out of this valley, we found the river where I shot a couple photos that could work well as part of this set.
Andeuten, wie du es in etwa machen würdest. Danke. Danke. Den Spot einfach genießen. Danke. Cool. Dann... Ja, genau. Nur mit so einem.
And with that, the first and main shoot was done. There was, however, still a little something left to shoot. For this concept, I still needed a couple photos of the father character, and for this I decided to ask the father that I know best, my own. So one cold morning I went out on a wee walk with my dad to shoot a couple photos.
Have a look slightly to your left and back to the forest. See, maybe get one more thing.
These turned out pretty cool, I think. Cooler than what I actually need for this project.
You didn't know back then, but you've been knowing.
This brings us to the last step, which is post-production. I spent a lot of time selecting and editing my photos in Lightroom. I usually started off with one of my presets and then worked from there. As you've seen in the photos, I played around with multiple different styles. One nostalgic, warm, filmic look, another more classic look that's vibrant and I'd almost say commercial, some black-white looks, and those dark edits that I ended up liking a lot. After that, I played around in Photoshop and InDesign to create the final presentation, a simple PDF file that sort of summarizes the campaign and the work. This would be something for the portfolio and also a file that can easily be shared with the brand to introduce myself. Oh, and now you can see why I shot some of those environmental shots that, as standalone photos, might appear a little random. However, as a presentation, I think it adds a lot actually.
You didn't know back then, but you've been knowing now. Black lines and dominoes, pushing.
Anyway, that that is it. This is done. It was a really fun one to work on, and despite the change in mood and lighting, I think I was luckily able to adapt and make the best of it. This was some great practice. Thank you again to Fabian for modelling and also all of the assistants on the shoot. Before saying goodbye, I would like to say a massive thank you to the lovely people supporting me and my work on Patreon. Thank you so much to each one of you. If you're interested in Lightroom presets, colour grading tutorials and stuff like that, you can check out my page via the link in the description. Also, I have a print shop by the way, in case that is of interest to you, also link in the description. With that said, I hope to see you again soon. Until then, goodbye.